Hey guys, what's up? I'm CJ and welcome back to my galaxy. Today we're talking about Sunrise on the Reaping predictions because it is coming out. The novel is coming out in like the next day or two, depending on where you are. I don't really know what's happening with the Australia release because I went looking for it today to see if they were putting it on the shelves early at Big W and it wasn't there. And the people who, they called someone, right, and they said they don't know when they're getting the shipment in. So I'm not really sure how I'm gonna get this book, but why does Big W not have it? If you're American, right, or outside of Australia, just in general, I know I have a lot of subscribers outside of America. Big W is the biggest book retailer in Australia. So it's not just the bookstore, but it has quite a large book department, and it should definitely have one of the biggest releases of the year. So I don't know what's happening with that. It's really weird, and I will get my hands on it. But for now, let's just talk about what could possibly happen in the book. And I do not want to I don't want to edit too much. I do want to go in depth with these predictions. Look at how many predictions I have. You know what I want to do for this video? I just want to add like infographics, just some images of the characters I'm talking about, and I'm just gonna like do a little rant today about my predictions, what I think is happening with this novel. I have it all written down and ready to go, and I'm just gonna read out some things. And before I start, I also want to say with Sunrise on the Reaping, I'm going to be posting some book vlogs. I'm going to do part 1, rereading the Hunger Games, and where I'm reading the 4 novels that have already been released previously. I'm still rereading those novels, so it's going to be a couple weeks until that comes out. And then part 2 is going to be start reading Sunrise on the Reaping for the first time. So stay tuned for that, so you know whether or not my predictions actually came true from this video. Well, you'll read the novel, so you'll know or not. I want to start off with quite a big prediction, is that the girl tribute, not Maisie Donna, but the girl tribute that Haymitch considers like a sister, is going to escape. I know this is really far-fetched, this idea, but I do think it is a possibility because everything about this whole novel means that what we were told in Catching Fire is completely a lie. So Peter and Katniss saw a highly edited version of Haymitch's games, and what I've been questioning is why is it that Haymitch wasn't allied with the people like who he'd be considering his prim, his Rue tribute to Katniss, and he's not allied with her in the arena. From what we see in Catching Fire, he's only allied with Maisie Donna. So I don't see why he wasn't allied unless there's something to do with her specifically that the Capitol had to edit out. Whether or not that's some big, you know, memorial, is that the right word? I don't know. The way that Katniss memorialized, I don't know the word. It's way too late for me to be recording this video. But the way that Katniss gave like a burial to Rue, it could be like that, except it was like bigger than Rue because, well, we actually don't know if Rue was cut out. No, in the movies, Rue was not cut out of the film. Like they were, I don't know, live streaming it. It was live to all of Panem, what Katniss was doing. So maybe that happened with Haymitch and they had to edit it out later on and there was a lot of propaganda involved. But I do think that she somehow escaped. And you'll see this as a common theme throughout all my predictions, that I think that it has to do with a lot of people not actually dying. And that brings me to my next part of my prediction, is that Lenore Dove didn't actually die. She has like a Lucy Gray type death, and we don't know if Lucy Gray actually died. It was actually a very ambiguous ending, as we know, and I think that because Lenore Dove, she has a double banger name, just like the Covey, and she sounds a lot like, it's a Covey name, so there's a high chance she's a part of the Covey in the same way Lucy Gray was, and why not associate her with another Covey's death? What I have written down for Lenore Dove is the geese. The geese, that's it. The geese from the excerpt that was released a couple of days mentioning that if you haven't read the books, you have no idea about this, but at the end of Mockingjay, Haymitch and this is just a throwaway line that everyone in the fandom has always seen as kind of odd, and it's likely, we thought that it's likely to do with his past in some way, but we didn't know exactly, we weren't sure exactly what it was about. But the geese, he raises geese at the end of Mockingjay, and in between kind of shipments of alcohol into the District 12 at the end of the war. And we're all like, why did he raise geese? Well, in the excerpt, Lenore Dove raises geese. So it has to do with Haymitch later on, and I also wrote down potential epilogue. So maybe the fact that he's raising geese could just be like a little small, in the way, same way the epilogue for Katniss and Peter is really kind of short and sweet and kind of to the point that they're living a happy, peaceful life. Maybe it's just Haymitch, you know, feeding some geese and reflecting on Lenore Dove and his relationship and with her, and the kind of memory of Lenore Dove in the future that maybe, and I've seen this specifically in people talking about that, and now that I think about it, it's the first time his birthday, and if you haven't listened to the excerpt, you definitely should, because in the excerpt, Lenore Dove is going on about how Haymitch has never had a birthday without the reaping on it at the same time. So basically, he's like, no, I assume that the reaping is going to be on my birthday every year. And Lenore Dove's like, no, you can't just assume that. And she has this kind of like philosophical tangent to Haymitch, and she's like super smart. She seems like a very smart character. I'm very excited to get to know Lenore Dove. And optimistic, always finding the silver lining. But people think that because of this, he's going to be reflecting on her saying that to him in the epilogue, and when he finally gets his first birthday without a reaping on that day, and maybe he's feeding the geese. And I can see it now, and I want it so bad. I want to be sobbing, just tears of happiness that Haymitch finally got this like happy ending, even though like he went through all of this pain, but that he eventually found peace in the same way Katniss and Peter did. Well, he had to go through a lot different. I don't know, I wouldn't argue a lot worse. It's just different in their pain and their experiences and their PTSD, but it's depressing nonetheless. But just having that ending, I think that would be just so adorable. And that's definitely something I think is going to happen. There's definitely going to be an epilogue, because there was an epilogue for Songbirds and Snakes as well. And I did say this was going to be like a massive rant, because I keep going from prediction to prediction really fast. I'm hoping you guys can keep up with this, but that's what I warned you guys, okay? So don't blame me when I keep just jumping around, right? There's going to be an epilogue. It's going to be about Lenore Dove and obviously his family as well. And it's going to make us all really sad. So what else do I have for Plutarch appearance? I also definitely think that at the end there's going to be, this potentially could be the epilogue as well, or towards the very end of the main part of the story, that he meets Plutarch somewhere and joins the rebellion. I definitely think at the end of his games, after his family and Lenore Dove has been killed, that he's going to join the rebellion, because he has something to fight for now, or something to fight against, because the people he wanted to fight for are gone. And Plutarch's going to be that, and we know that Plutarch's the propaganda guy, so we know his character's likely going to be there. My forehead's itchy, I'm sorry guys, I'm just scratching my face at the same time. Now it's red. Okay, this is why I edit my videos like I do. Don't worry about it, okay? So what else do I have? Parallels with Katniss. Haymitch definitely knows or knew Mr. Everdeen, and I think this is something that people have been speculating about forever, and honestly, definitely around the time the new novel was announced, that Haymitch knew Mr. Everdeen. We know that Haymitch is Seam, Mr. Everdeen and Katniss are Seam, from the Seam, not the merchant class, and there's a big class divide in District 12 as well. If Haymitch moves outside of District 12 into the meadow and into the woods in the same way Katniss does, Mr. Everdeen does, it is more than likely, and Haymitch also hangs around the Hob in the original trilogy as well, it is more than likely the two have at least interacted in some way. They have more than likely met in some way, and that's why Haymitch knew that Katniss would be a fighter, because he knew that her father was a fighter as well. And what else have I said about Katniss? Rue and Prim slash Sid and girl tribute, essentially meaning that Sid and the girl tribute are going to be representing Prim and Rue, and I feel like that one's fairly obvious, that it's not so much a prediction, more like an observation at this point, because the excerpts we have seen are definitely indicating the kind of relationship and parallels with Haymitch and Katniss, and we know the two think very alike since they're essentially able to read each other's minds in the original trilogy, and it's a very main theme, or I guess literary device, that Suzanne Collins employs to bring across those parallels with the characters. And I just have dead dad as one of the points, and they both have dead dads who were killed in the coal mines. But the thing is, that is probably a very likely occurrence for a lot of District 12 people, civilians, just in general. And another thing I've seen in the fandom as well is Katniss not deserving Peter, and the whole line of you could live 1,000 lifetimes and not deserve that boy, to Haymitch saying that to Katniss. And that people think that someone said that about Lenore Dove to Haymitch, which would be like almost like a devastatingly beautiful line to say for such an incredible parallel. I don't know for sure if this one's going to come true, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. And I think it'd be, or if someone said something incredibly harsh to Haymitch about Lenore Dove, like Snow saying that to him, it would just, that would be insane. I can definitely see it happening, but I don't know if it'd be a direct parallel. It would just be something that's very similar in a way. It won't be word for word the same thing that Haymitch said to Katniss. What else do I have? Probably more parallels to Peter than we're expecting. And I definitely think that we're going to see Haymitch, what did I say? That's why Peter and Haymitch worked together to manipulate the Capitol so well. We know that Peter likes the color orange, like the sunset. I'm pretty sure it's the sunset, not the sunrise, but like the sunrise being the opposite of Peter, opposite of, it's kind of the beginning of the end in a way, that Haymitch was the beginning of the end of Panem and the Capitol, and that Peter was that kind of addition that they needed to Katniss's spark, right? So Haymitch being able to work well with Peter is going to be very reflective of Haymitch's personality, is going to reflect both Katniss and Peter. We're going to be seeing a lot of Peter. I can almost guarantee you that you're going to see lines and be like, that's not Katniss, that's Peter. From what we know from the Caesar Flickerman interviews in Catching Fire, I would say it's very parallel to the way, the charisma of Peter as well. The Haymitch is like this very, I want to say brooding character. He's very charismatic, and honestly, Katniss describes him as such. I think she even reluctantly says that he looks handsome in the Caesar Flickerman interviews, Haymitch's games, and Peter very much parallels that in Catching Fire already. So the fact that we're definitely 100% going to be seeing a lot of Peter in Haymitch, the way that we haven't seen it before, and I really hope that's true, because I really desperately want to see that depth and why Haymitch and Peter were able to plan around the Capitol and their interviews and the way Peter reacts to the way he speaks. Why did they work so well together in that way? We know that Katniss and Haymitch didn't, because they butt heads for being too similar. But what about Haymitch and Peter? You know, what's going on there? There has to be some sort of similarities. The last predictions I'm going to be making is essentially the layout of what's going to be happening in the books compared to how the layout was for the original trilogy and Songbirds and Snakes. We know from something they posted on Instagram recently, and I don't know if they posted it anywhere else, I personally saw it on Instagram, that they were talking about how the pages for Sunrise on the Reaping is closer to the length of the original trilogy, and Songbirds and Snakes is such a long novel. It's much longer than the original trilogy, which is kind of good in a way, but at the same time it means that there's going to be less room for the depth that Songbirds and Snakes gave us. But that kind of fits perfectly with Snow's character having such a long novel, because we needed that description. But I should not be talking about Songbirds and Snakes, I was talking about Sunrise on the Reaping, that I do find it quite fascinating and interesting. I really desperately want to know why it's the length that it is, that we we do probably know a lot of Haymitch's story already and the way he interacts simply because, or interacts with the audience, us as readers, simply because Katniss is going to have interacted with us as readers in the same way. So this is a field that we're familiar as readers with, rather than Songbirds and Snakes. We're not familiar with reading from a perspective of an antagonist. It's not something that a lot of people do in the industry. It does happen, and it does happen well, like with Songbirds and Snakes, but it doesn't happen that often. But that does mean the layout might look different, but I'm also wondering, is it going to look the same as the original trilogy then, or what? Because in the original trilogy, in the first book, right, we didn't get a lot of after the games because we had 2 other books that were insistent on describing the aftermath of the games, and or at least one book, Mockingjay, the war part of it. But we don't see a war in Haymitch's games, so we're going to have to see a different part, which leads me to believe that it is going to be a similar layout to Songbirds and Snakes. What I've written down is that we're going to be briefly at the Reaping, like we were in literally all the other novels, that there's a very brief moment of panic. Will I be chosen? Will Prim be chosen? Do I need a volunteer for her? And for Snow, it was which district am I going to get so I can mentor someone and win that plinth prize? And then we go into the lead up of the games, essentially where the games do start, socially speaking, and socially speaking, and pertaining to the dictator Snow himself, that the games begin because he is watching people to make sure they stay aligned with the capital and the authoritarian state, so they don't step out of line and cause a rebellion. So we see the lead up of the games, and the socially speaking, I keep messing up my words, it's so late, man, oh my god, right, and socially how the capital perceives everything, and the social aspect of the games themselves. And then there's the actual games, the actual fights to the death, and that is in all the books a very large chunk of the story. So we're going to be seeing quite a bit of that, and I do think that because everything's going to be alive, we're going to get a lot of dialogue we haven't heard before, a lot of things that the Capital would have edited out from the Katniss and Peter version. So I think that this part is going to be very in-depth, but it's not going to necessarily be it's not going to be super long, but it's going to be a large chunk of the novel, because we also have the 2-week period that we were told by Haymitch himself that within 2 weeks after his games, Haymitch's entire family and his girl, being Lenore Dove, he says just his girl in Catching Fire, she wasn't named in the original trilogy, they were dead within 2 weeks after his games. So we need enough of the novel to be after the games as well, to kind of showcase that 2-week period in depth. And if Suzanne Collins has done this right, in the same way that she's done her previous novels, and she likely very much has, because that's clearly her writing style, she's going to give us that in-depth area, that in-depth story of Haymitch and the 2-week period, that he was kind of, his whole soul was destroyed, and he was manipulated into following under Snow's regime and making sure he doesn't join the rebellion, but in that way he does join the rebellion at some point. So we will be seeing that essentially in the 2-week period. And like I said earlier, there is almost definitely going to be an epilogue to this story, since we know that in Songbirds and Snakes there was an epilogue where we skipped I think we skipped about a year, 6 months to a year or something like that, ahead in time with the epilogue. We don't know for sure how far ahead, and I did give it a couple of options at the beginning of the video, but there's definitely going to be an epilogue, and I said in my notes, after the war epilogue, which is where I said he could be feeding the geese and thinking about the memory of Lenore Dove, and it could be the day of July 4th, which is Haymitch's birthday, when the reaping usually occurs. Or it could be when Haymitch joins the rebellion, possibly meeting Plutarch, the Plutarch introducing him to the rebellion. Maybe it's another character, but I personally have my money on Plutarch introducing him to the rebellion. And this is going to be absolutely depressing. I think there's also a possibility that it could be Haymitch's first games as a mentor. So you kind of have that time skip that Songbirds and Snakes had, kind of like a year in the future. With Haymitch's games, it'll be the 51st Hunger Games where he was a mentor for the first time, and possibly even, I've heard also people talking about this part when Haymitch takes his first drink, or when he becomes an alcoholic, officially an alcoholic, when he's like using it to drown his emotions, that's the epilogue. We're seeing him starting to drown himself in his sorrows, in his pain, once he sees for the first time the two tributes die because he wasn't able, or he feels like he wasn't able to save them. But going into this is going to be devastating. I'm gonna cry. I think I'm gonna be violently sobbing because everything we were told was a lie. That's why I'm rereading The Hunger Games now before I read Sunrise on the Reaping, because I know that at least that Sunrise on the Reaping, yeah, Catching Fire, completely different name. Catching Fire is going to, we're going to have a completely different perspective on that entirely, and the way I see that novel is going to be changed essentially forever. So I'm like, I need to reread this just to perceive it in the same way that I've been perceiving this novel for the past like decade of my life. I read it when I was 9, so it's over a decade I've been reading this novel in the same way, or not exactly the same way because I pick up on new things all the time, but in like a very similar way. And it's going to be insane to just reread the part where Candace and Peter are looking at Haymitch's games and going, that didn't actually happen. It's all a lie, and I cannot wait for this novel. Hopefully you guys understood my predictions well enough, and let me know your own predictions down in the comments below. Do you have the same predictions as me? Do you think the layout of the novel is going to be like that brief description of the games themselves, the 2 weeks after, and an epilogue, in the same way that the Songbirds and Snakes was written? I do personally think it's going to be like that because it is a prequel book. I would absolutely love to know your comments down below, answer all those questions, let me know your thoughts. But if you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate the support. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, but I've been CJ, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.